Hello, Ken. How you doing? Thank
I'm
you
doing
for
pretty
coming
good.
thank you for coming on to the channel. And we haven't done a recording, I think, in almost 2 years.
Oh, is that long?
I think been 2 years. I'd have to
Hey.
double check, but I think it's been pretty close
Oh,
to years, maybe a year and a half.
just check, see how much.
So, a lot has happened. But I'd like to take the opportunity for the audience to get your um, knowledge about C60 and how it could help with their health. And everyone that watches my show, I couple it with a bunch of other stuff. I put it in anti-aging boxes and stuff, and but there's a lot of benefits. I've been using C60 for probably close to 4 or 5 years now, and I just yeah, my personal experience with it is that I used to be farsighted, and I no longer needed to use my farsighted glasses about 3 months into using C60, and that's when I started like getting more interested into it. And I how I found about C60 was when you were doing shows with Rex.
Oh, okay, yeah. That
Yeah,
was a
so
big
and
show.
that's how I learned about C60 was the shows that he did. And then then you and I have done shows, and I carry your products in my store. So uh thank you very much for coming onto the show. And yeah, for ones that want to know what C60 is, let's start with the basics.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll just go start back. Well, C60 is a is a little molecule of 60 carbon atoms shaped like a soccer ball. If you can see it, it's kind of right behind me there. And it was discovered in 1985 by three researchers. It solved a long-standing mystery in astronomy. And in 1996, Harry Kroto, Richard Smalley, and Robert Curl got a Nobel Prize in chemistry for the discovery of this unique molecule. Because as you can see, it's like a spherical molecule and of all of the same elements, which was unique. And it has unique chemical properties, and which we'll probably be talking about, obviously, like that. But what happened, it was really hard to make. It's still pretty hard to make. High purity C60 costs twice as much as gold by weight. And it wasn't until the early 2000s they really started to do scientific testing for toxicity, because here's a molecule found in outer space. It's also found on Earth, like the burnt wick of a candle is like 0.25% C60. You'll find it in lightning strikes. It's created in meteoric impacts, so it's around, but not in high concentrations. And so one of the famous first studies was the Botry study, and that in that study it basically increased the lifespan of test animals by 90%. Now those were Worcester rats, so they're kind of a type of a wimpy rat that kind of imitates human aging. And so that was an increase, and they die of cancers and cognitive decline and other diseases associated with aging. But the Worcester rats had none of those, and that's why they lived to such an extremely long lifetime. And there was some other studies, like there's after the study went for 5.5 years. It's rumored that the last couple of rats had a terrible accident. In this case, it was a case of perish, so you can publish. And but some people learned from their study, so they did another study with mice, which have a much shorter lifespan, and they use wild type mice. So they're kind of, they're tougher mice, and they found it increased lifespan by 11%, but it completely prevented cognitive decline during aging of those mice, the wild type mice. And that's what C60 does. It doesn't just increase lifespan, it increases health span. Because who wants to be like decrepit in a wheelchair? I mean, that's really not what people are looking for in life. And so so that kind of extends the life. Now, my personal experience with C60, I was running the metal oxygen fusion reactor project. And, it's kind of a replacement for energy from Fukushima, a safe form of energy production. And there was the problem with it is a lot of people that did this research, as a late professor this and the dead PhD that. And so I didn't want to end up, my crew or myself to end up like that. So I went researching for some radiation protected. And I discovered this stuff called carbon 60, C60. Its scientific name is Buckminster fullerene. And for some of you, the older people out there with some gray hair, you may remember Buckminster Fuller. He was a polymath from like the 60s and 70s. He made those geodesic domes, you know, the hippie domes and other things. And so they named it the thing after him because all of the guys that were doing it were kind of aficionados at it. And it's kind of spherical, right? Kind of like a hippie dome. So Buckminster Fullerene it became. And so where was I going here?
We were talking about the shape of the
Yeah,
molecule.
and so it's kind of unique.
And then you were in the lab and you
Oh yeah,
needed
the
it.
labs, whatever. Yeah, it's early morning here. I need my coffee. But and so I just one set of rats got C60, the other didn't. They hit them with a fatal dose of radiation. The C60 rats lived, where the control group, of course, died. And when I learned about that, I got a couple sources of C60 and for my crew and myself, and we're all still alive, so it must have worked for that. But I kept taking it afterwards because I had better mental focus, more energy, and those afternoon blahs you get after eating lunch kind of went away. And about 7 months afterwards, I went in to see my optometrist and my eye doctor, and my drues, or dry macular degeneration, had completely disappeared. And he'd never seen that. He was a really old guy, so he'd never seen that in his practice. It's supposedly incurable thing. Well, considering my situation, let me grab something here. Forgot to grab my samples. Can't be talking about it without samples. We'll see how. It's working too because I got a green screen. So sometimes things don't work well. So anyway,
I do have some samples.
I got C60 and MCT oil. Now I made it for my friend Gary Rodriguez. He was the electrical engineer on the Moxie fusion reactor project, and he had developed severe wet macular degeneration. It was so bad, he was going to have to quit his work as an engineer. So I made C60 and MCT oil. If you can get up there, kind of see it close. And for those out there that are listening, MCT stands for medium chain triglycerides, and your liver can turn those into ketones. And ketones can be used by your cells as a flex fuel. So your cells can run off glucose or they can run off ketones. So he had type 2 diabetes, which really contributed to his severe wet macular degeneration. And he took a tablespoon of C60 and MCT oil for over a year, little over a year, and his severe wet macular degeneration completely went away. And we used to be able to post the pictures online, but some three-letter agency said that's making a claim. And his type 2 diabetes went subclinical. So that kind of started it off. I mean, at that point, obviously there was something going on here. And since losing your vision is really, really bad, I, learned to make formulations for myself. So I started, making it for friends, family, and myself. And I shared it with alternative healthcare practitioners, and they had great results. So they shared it with their patients, and they had great results. And one day somebody mentioned it, how it helped save his and his wife's life online, and the whole thing kind of blew up there. So we were going to talk about, I'll give like the three things you want to look for. And this is where kind of when it well blew up, when C60 was a small group of people, right? There were just a bunch of geeky scientists, and there was just a handful of people that used it, probably a couple thousand maybe. And so everybody made a quality product for their customers and themselves. So everything was great, right? But once it became popular, well, bad things started to happen because you get the scammers come in. And now there are people out there that sell products that have no C60 in them, or low concentrations of C60, or low quality C60. And so that's kind of what happened. And so when you're looking for a C60 product, there's things, and we're not the only one that does it. What you want to do is you want to get 99.99% pure C60 because that's the highest purity you want. And you want to get a source that's called sublimation. And for those of you who are not paying attention in chemistry class, sublimation is when a solid turns into a gas, then back into a solid. It's like evaporation, how evaporation is used for distillation for, alcoholic beverages. So it's a very clean way and simple way of purifying it. Now, there's a lot of C60 out there, which there's industrial uses of C60, and they do an industrial purification process, which uses methylbenzene, also known as toluene, which is a known carcinogen. So you probably don't want toluene or methylbenzene in your C60 as and to be taking a known carcinogen in your diet.
Right. So the ones that aren't so scientifically inclined, like you and I, right?
Yes.
What Ken is saying is that the filtration process, the sublimation process helps with the purification. Instead of a chemical purification, there is a sublimation
Yeah,
purification.
a physical purification, like distillation. You know how they make high, alcohol. It's the same thing. It's a distillation process.
Right. So when people get confused that, well, some products may be carcinogenic. Well, it's not the C60 that's carcinogenic. It's the
No.
filtration process that's carcinogenic.
Oh yeah, and that's a good thing. Yeah,
So,
that's
so and another thing that's important to realize is that during these filtration processes, these buckyballs, there are things like C60 and C70 and
mhm.
larger molecules, and this is part of the reason why you want to filter it out, because it's the C60 molecule that's the secret sauce, right?
Yes,
All
yeah,
right. You don't want the C70, you want the C60. So, you have to go through these filtration processes, and you want that very high purity level that you're talking about,
yeah, and
which
that's yeah.
this product has, and it's not just the MCT, it's also the coconut.
Yeah, and these are good, just good customer practice. Like one of the things here on all of our products, you'll see a little QR code, and
Mhm.
that's we got that from the because there's been so many problems, and you can scan that in with your phone, and it'll give you because after we make our product, it goes to third party testing, where they test for microbiologics to make it's so and purity of the C concentration of C60, so it's safe and effective. And what we say is on the thing, you can see the third party testing confirms it. And there's also places where you can see the certificate of analysis so that like our olive oil is really farm sourced olive oil. It's not cut with canola oil, and it's all organic. And the same with the avocado oil and the MCT oil. And so these are good, just good practices. We're not the only company that does this. And really, it's just good practices that if you're looking for a C60 supplier, whether it's us or somebody else, which we're C60 Power or C60 Purple Power, just that you have these basics to know that you're getting a safe and effective product, because they're just scammers out there. And we actually did a study, and there is a and we work with other good C60 companies, but somewhere like 60% of the C60 companies out there are just flat out lying to you about their products. 60%, it used to be none, but now it's 60%.
Well, I think it's the problem here, Ken, is that it's the supplement business in general. You have some really, really high quality providers. And then there is that, the low quality providers. And unfortunately, the low quality providers brings down the high quality providers in the perception of the population. So they go, well, oh, D3 doesn't work. Well, D3 is really important for your health. If you did, and it's
Yeah.
not just, and I think the key here is that a lot of people think that it's just one thing that's like a magic bullet that's going to change their life. But the reality is it's tied to nutrition, it's tied to proper diet and exercise and balancing and
Oh,
proper
yeah.
I mean, there's lots of studies, where if someone isn't getting enough REM sleep, they're not detoxifying their body, not just outside of the central nervous system, but inside
Yeah.
the central.
Yeah. That's
So
where it is. Yes.
and then you couple some of these supplements, these different types of supplements with C60, and you get this kind of added benefit. Just taking C60 does a lot. I mean, it's a very, very strong antioxidant. So, maybe we should, move in that direction, Ken, and,
Oh,
and you explain to the audience when someone takes C60, this, the better filtrated, sublimated C60 that you and I offer. Okay, for the antioxidant capability of it, you know,
yeah. Yeah.
what will they get from that benefit?
Well, yeah. First, we antioxidants. Basically, antioxidants says they're antioxidation. So basically, oxidative stress is your body rusting. You get up in the morning and your joints are sore. You're kind of like the Tin Man. Literally, you're rusting in there, and that's what's causing the pain. And then we know all about antioxidants. There's some xanthins, luteins, and all those other ones that you get from, let's say, your colorful fruits and vegetables, right? Those are endogenous, though you get them from your diet, and they're all an important part of your diet. And you should be taking those along with a whole bunch of other good things in your diet. The stay away from those seed oils and other things. And we could go, there could be days of videos on that, but that's important. Then there's some endogenous antioxidants your body makes itself. And some of those can be supplemented for. And I talk about like the four main ones. And one is CoQ10. And that is something you can supplement for. And definitely, if you've got a little bit of gray hair, you should be supplementing for. Because as we get older, when you're young, everything's great, you feel great, and that because your cells in your body makes a lot of antioxidants, and you're young, right? Everything's working great. As you get older, production of endogenous antioxidants that your body makes goes down, and problems develop. And that's why you supplement to make up for the things that your body's not doing, and or the environment's not giving you. And so you can do CoQ10, and the other one is glutathione. And for a while there was some problems with glutathione supplementation, but they have some liposomals and various other ways that you can get glutathione in. And so it's something you can supplement for, and you probably should. And then there's two other antioxidants you can't really supplement for. One is SOD, also known as superoxide dismutase, and catalase. And they work together to take care of the most damaging oxidative radical in the body called superoxide. And that's an oxygen with an extra electron. And if anything's going to cause rusting, that's going to be causing it. That's the ultimate oxidative, damage one. And that's also produced a large part in your mitochondria, because your mitochondria are little organelles in your cell, and they produce ATP, the energy molecule of the cell. They're like little furnaces, and they give off pollution. One of them is superoxide, and usually your body has SOD and catalase that work together to neutralize that. Well, C60 does the job of both of those in one shot. And as we get older, you get a little gray hair, that's pretty much a sign that your SOD catalase levels are going down. So you need to supplement for that. And before C60, there was nothing for that. Now, C60 is not SOD and it's not catalase. It's actually a mimic that does the job of both of those in one shot. And so no, I'll just go like usually SOD, if you had superoxide, it's an oxygen with an extra electron. I'm going to talk a little sciencey here. What happens is SOD takes that and takes that superoxide and turns it into hydrogen peroxide. And then catalase takes that hydrogen peroxide, turns it back into an oxygen and water. And that's what happens. C60 just basically, it's kind of unique. If you look at the cage-like structure behind it, it's the only molecule we know of in chemistry which actually gets a positive charge, not by giving an electron into the environment, but by actually putting a positive hydrogen ion inside of its cage-like structure. And then it uses those positive hydrogen ions to neutralize things like superoxide dismutase. Superoxide. And when you got the oxygen with the extra electron, it'll stick to the positively charged C60, and then the C60 will literally take the electron, give it to one of the hydrogen ions, turning it into hydrogen gas. It lets the oxygen go back to the Krebs cycle, going back to be regular oxygen. And then the C60 just pulls another hydrogen ion from the environment and resets itself. And its capacity to reset itself again and again and again without using the body's chemistry is why it's characterized as several hundred times more powerful than conventional antioxidants. Now, some antioxidant like SOD, when it interacts with superoxide, it's going to actually get deformed. And then you actually have to take an enzyme and some ATP, and it kind of resets the SOD. It does the same for glutathione, CoQ10, catalase. These things happen, they got to be reset, and the body takes chemistry, right? It's got to use ATP and enzymes to make that happen. C60 can do it all on its own. And they suspect that C60 was the original antioxidant of life because it's hydrophobic. That means it kind of repels from water, so it floats on water's surface, and it's made in large quantities by meteoric impact. So there were literally, in the early Earth, there were geologic deposits of C60 on the ocean, the shores of some ancient ocean. And the C60 is fat lipic. It means it attracts abiotically produced fats and amino acids and hydrogen gas. And so it would have been the perfect scaffolding for RNA and DNA chemistry to exist. In fact, if you freeze RNA or DNA to it really, really, really cold, C60 would fit into the side groove of RNA or into the groove of RNA or the side groove of DNA. And there's some evidence to support this. Usually C60's concentration is like they found in all the science research is 0.1 to 0.2 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. And that's a pretty low amount if you think about it for those people. That's thousandth of what you would imagine. Well, they took C60 up to 1 gram per kilogram of body weight in test animals. And that's like 5,000 to 10,000 times the health beneficial dose. And even at that level, that insane level, there was no toxicity. If you tried to do that with vitamin E and vitamin D, which are also antioxidants, that would have killed the organism. But C60 had no toxicity at all. And that's why they think it's the original antioxidant of life, and that SOD and catalase were actually evolved by cells later to replace the missing C60 as, the earth evolved over time.
Right, right, right. I think that for the ones that are sciencey, what is interesting about organic chemistry, especially high levels of carbon, is that the mechanism and the movement of the electrons. This is not a step, even though it's circular and it's very strong. It's a strong molecule, right? This is just by looking at the structure, it's strong, right?
Yeah.
But there's a shimmering, for lack of a better term. It's been a while since I've had organic chemistry, but there's the shimmering when you actually are working out the mechanisms of the electrons moving around. So even though it's a strong molecule, it is an active molecule.
Yes,
because of this activity of the shimmering of the electrons amongst the other carbons, it has this bioreactivity that lends itself to be able to soak up all these oxidants.
And it only interacts with two. It's actually a cousin of diamond. It's an allotropal carbon. And like diamond is an allotropal carbon, the various fullerenes are allotropes of carbon, graphene, graphite. They're just, and even though they're totally different, graphite is black, right? And it's really soft. Diamond is, clear and very hard. So even though they're made of exactly the same substance. So C60 only interacts with two oxidative radicals: superoxide, the most damaging oxidative radical in the body, and the hydroxyl ion. And the hydroxyl ion is just basically a water molecule missing its proton. So it has a free electron there. And that's all C60 interacts with. C60 doesn't interact with things like nitrogen oxides. That's a vasodilator. Guys, that's very important. And you wouldn't want C60 to interact with that. And that's methylene blue, by the way, interacts with nitric oxide. So if you want a good woody, guys, don't be taking methylene blue. And so I'm not a medical doctor. I cannot give medical advice, but I'm a science researcher, so I can give you some, kind of something on the side there. And so that's all it interacts with. And so C60 does not interfere with any of the body's signaling molecules. It's nitrogen oxide is one, hydrogen peroxide is another. There's a bunch of others based around sulfur, iron, and zinc. And a lot of them are oxidative radicals. And in fact, that's also why C60 is the only antioxidant which can increase athletic performance. They've done studies of vitamin C and vitamin E, which people take. And the problem is you need a certain amount of that. But if you take too much, then that actually interferes with the body's signaling molecules and athletic performance goes down. And they've done meta studies and they found that taking extra vitamin C and E will not improve athletic performance, but taking more C60 will, of course, above a certain level. In fact, we've had people that have gone from mid-pack in their fields to champions using C60. And C60, by the way, is not banned by any athletic organization. We've actually talked with them and they don't even respond because it's not a mineral, it's not a nutrient, it's not a supplement, it's not a vitamin, it's not a drug, it's like it's its own crazy class, and I don't think their minds can grasp it. So it's still legal to take C60 in athletic performance.
Well, what I have heard from customers, what they do is they take it on an empty stomach right before their workout, and the recovery time after weightlifting or after a run is much quicker.
Yeah,
which totally makes sense, because now you've loaded your body with an antioxidant, and because you're exercising, you're going to start producing oxidants, and it's up, and your recovery is better. So
yeah, that's a particular antioxidant, because one of the things that happens is when you exercise a lot, your mitochondria, they can crank out 100 times more ATP than they normally do at resting, literally. And that means you're going to be producing 100 times more more superoxide, and it just literally overwhelms the ability, your body's ability, your cell's ability to deal with that, and that superoxide floods out into your cells and starts causing damage. And one of the worst nasties it makes, it combines with nitrogen oxide to make peroxynitrite. And that thing can travel a long distance. That's what gives you the sore muscles, that peroxynitrite. So if the C60 stops the superoxide before making that nasty, then you don't get that DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. And yeah, and that's one of the best things people love about C60, especially athletes, is for instance, an anecdotal story. We had, a couple of kids, they're in college football, right? And they do spring training. And they just work them. They just brutalize them. You're in spring training, they brutalize them. And of course, usually people just lie and they get back and they just lying around. They just, anyway, they just try to recover for the next day. Well, these guys were taking C60, which they got from one of the guys' dads who was using it. And after 45 minutes to an hour, they'd be recovered and they go out on the town. Whereas everybody else, the whole team was just lying around suffering. And so that's another benefit of C60. It gives you a little bit more hours in your life. And eventually they asked them and they gave it. And so a lot of the people on the team and the coaches started taking C60. They didn't win the championship though. It's a C60 can improve athletic performance, but
a lot
to start off with.
A lot of people don't realize that we have an amazing capacity to heal. But that capacity to heal starts to go in reverse, and we don't heal as fast. And that inflection point is around age 35, age 30, depending on someone's lifestyle, right, and genetics. But it's around that point where we have this amazing ability to regenerate, but then it starts to slow down. So once we hit about age 30 or 35, our capacity to heal starts to slow down, and there's an increase of this oxidation, right? So this is why I keep on saying that earlier you start on C60, the better off you are, because there's this compounding benefit. It's like saving money in a bank in a way.
Yes. Yes.
Because you wanted to reduce the oxidative damage in your 20s, right? So you have more runway of longevity and vitality, right, in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right?
Oh yeah, and that's something people, and actually I would recommend people, not that I'm a medical doctor and give advice, is to get like a DNA testing. Get your epigenetic testing, get your DNA testing, so you know what your vulnerabilities are, what your biological age is, and so that you can make choices when you're young, in your 20s. I mean, I think every high schooler should have DNA testing and epigenetic testing, so they know what particularities, because each one of us you could have a particular allele set that maybe makes you like I did mine, and I like have no capacity to digest beans. Sorry,
You
so
stay with
yeah, I do enjoy it, and and I have a few others. I don't process B vitamins as well as I should, so I need to take more B vitamins. And just as that, and I have other good things. I process vitamin D very, very well, and so
well,
that's
this is why I when I tell people how to improve mitochondrial health, taking B1 through 5 helps with the electron transport chain that's in the mitochondria. You couple that with the C60 to be able to soak up all
and
those
vitamin
free
C.
radicals, and your mitochondria is like in supercharge.
Yeah, and vitamin C, because vitamin C is part of the Krebs cycle chain. I mean, you need all of these things. The C60 is just one tool in the toolkit for good health. You need all of this stuff to make you good, but it's a really critical one because there's nothing else like it in that one section of dealing with SOD catalase, because it'll take care of that. It also takes care of the hydroxyl ion, which usually glutathione takes care of that. That's kind of glutathione's job. Glutathione has, of course, a dozen jobs. That's one of the jobs. So when you take C60, C60 takes care of that job of glutathiones, which is one of its main jobs. So any remaining glutathione you have in your system can go to do other things that are critical as well, especially as we get older. And that's why, supplementation like just CoQ10, glutathione, C60, these are just critical things if you want to live a long, if you want a good health span. you know.
Right. I think that's the key is it's not just about uh, extending your age, but it's about vitality.
Oh yeah, and there's things like, for instance, in the American diet that are just not there, like iodine. Most people, unless you live on the seacoast and eat a lot of seafood, you don't have enough iodine. You should be supplementing for iodine. Magnesium, that's another one. Vitamin D3 and K, what is it? K1,
And
K2, K2,
MK7, MK7.
MK. Yeah, yeah. You need all of these things because they work. Vitamin D works with the K vitamins to do all that kind of stuff. You need all of this stuff, especially because look, most people are living in buildings. You're not getting the sunlight you need, especially in the wintertime. That's why people get sick in the wintertime because they're not getting the vitamin D they need to stay healthy. So, you probably should put sun lamps up in your house and take supplementation. And these are simple things people can do just to improve your health.
Right. Another thing that I don't think people realize is that heart disease, and they know this through autopsy data, right? Heart disease starts when you're about 8-15. All right. Cardiovascular disease starts at 8, and I'm sure you know this term yellow streak, the yellow streak in the vascular system.
Yes.
So what happens is that about age 16, individuals that will start to have inflammation in their vascular system and start getting a yellow streak. And that's the very beginnings of the cardiovascular disease and the building of the plaques. All right. So building a plaque is based on foam cells. All right. So there's this inflammation that's taking place at the vascular level. So if you bring down that inflammation, right, and when you have inflammation, you're dealing with free radicals too at the same time, right? It's not just pro-inflammatory cytokines, but there's these free radicals. So you bring that down, you're reducing the development of the plaques. But what's interesting with the foam cells is that you have these macrophages that go to this area that's inflamed, right? And there is a oxidative process of LDL. Well, if you can block the oxidative process of LDL, right, then you're reducing the foam cells and you're reducing the plaque buildup. And when you mix this stuff, this is the beauty of it. When you mix this stuff with like K2 and K7, you mix it with like vitamin D3, all right, because there's also calcium buildup that's taking place in these plaques. So you're trying to get some of this calcium back into the bloodstream and not be deposited. So the D3, the reduce blood glucose levels through ashwagandha, right? And turmeric to bring down those pro-inflammatory cytokines. When you mix this all together, you're actually slowly mimicking what they found with taking metformin, K2, right, to reduce plaque in the carotid artery. So, because the metformin is very similar to ashwagandha, right? So, the point I'm making is that by understanding some of the synergies of these things and taking it over a long period of time, you're bringing down that inflammatory response, you're bringing down the free radicals, you're bringing down the blood glucose levels, and you're allowing the body to slowly heal. The body will heal up to a certain point. And the earlier you do this, the better, because if you you can't tell like a teenager don't eat pizza, right? You can't,
Yes.
or hot dogs and hamburgers. But the thing is that the earlier you do this, you won't have that compound negative effect of the yellow streak that leads to blockage of arteries, that leads to high blood pressure, that leads to heart failure later down the road, right? So, and what's interesting is that even during every war really has huge advances in medicine, especially in surgery. And one of the big advances in heart surgery was during the Korean War. And when they were working on the soldiers in the Korean War, they started noticing that there was plaque buildup. Now you got to remember what was happening in the 50s that they didn't see in World War II in the 40s, and that is fast food. Fast food starts to come online after World War, right? And so some of these soldiers, they were starting to show cardiovascular disease in their early 20s during the Korean War, when they were looking at the hearts,
We should be more specifically fried foods.
well, yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's
well,
the
yeah,
thing. Fast food,
yeah.
fried foods, they're the
Well,
same.
right, exactly, exactly. But, and then, and, just looking at pictures today of, let's say, individuals in the 1920s or 1930s, they're just so much thinner
Mhm.
compared to
Oh yeah,
the
it's
average picture, in a
yeah.
modern city in the United States.
Yeah, you go to the Midwest, it looks like a cattle herd, or herd of
I literally,
swine
you know,
herd, you know.
everything is measured in tonnage now. It's sad because, there's a lot of people, they're trying, to like my brother, as you know, one of my brothers, he died from heart disease, but the surviving brother, he's gained weight over time, you know, and now he's struggling to try to lose it, right? And he's got the high blood pressure, he's got the diabetes, he's taking all this medication, right? And he's trying to just walk and and watch the diet and all that, and it's been somewhat successful, and he's losing weight, but it's a struggle. And I think a lot of people in America are that fall into this category, where they fell into the trap of food being comfort, and they get bigger, and then all of a sudden they start having health problems, and then they realize that they need to reverse course, and it's hard for them to maintain. So there's lots of ways, different ways to lose weight. Some people are taking medication to lose weight. I'm not sure if that's the best way to do it, but the key here is just to realize that there's a compound effect on supplementation, but it's also dealing with lifestyle change. It's about eating right, staying away from, the fast foods. I mean, literally, when my brother died, his last meal was Chipotle.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, Chipotle. I will not eat at Chipotle because of
yeah.
that.
I mean,
Ever, ever.
yeah, it's
But
just
his last meal, it was he had lunch. He had lunch, a later lunch, and he had Chipotle, and then later in the day he wasn't feeling well, and he came home, and my parents came over to his house, and he had a heart attack. But literally, his last meal was Chipotle,
yeah, I
which I
mean,
guess is somewhat comical in a way, but maybe not. But it's just I don't eat fast food. I stay
yeah,
away from it.
people have to, yeah, people didn't understand, the whole problem with trans fats and then and the seed oils. And I mean, your body just that's another thing that, by the way, getting your omega 3s. I mean, our body's designed to eat maybe one omega 6 to one omega 3. And
Mhm.
right now it's like 50 to 20 omega 6s to omega 3s. And it's just, I mean, that's because the seed oils and other things in our diet. And it's just, and that gets into your cellular, that gets into the membranes of your cells, and they don't work right because they got more omega 6s than omega 3s. And it doesn't go away. So I mean, really, if you're serious about it, you really just have to cut out almost all omega 6s and go totally omega 3s, because you're already filled with enough. And your body, as it recycles, it's still going to use some of those old ones. So it's there's various things you can do to accelerate that change, but that
And
cleanse.
you
But
don't
yeah,
even know that I offer omega 3 on my store, so you
okay,
didn't
yeah,
even know. That was a
yeah.
shameless plug.
Yeah,
But
people just have to. I mean, but that's what the whole point is. You want a whole good diet. It's a C60. It's great. In fact, that's probably what we probably should start with, because one of the reasons we're doing this is about all these things people find articles about C60 on the internet, about C60's bad or C60's this, and people should really understand. Like, for instance, one of the key things about C60 is, well, first off, if you ever want to know about C60, there's a really good website, whatisc60.org. That's whatisc60.org. And that's a 501c3. And our company and some other companies, good C60 companies, sponsor them, because like we can post human studies on our website, but we're not capable of posting animal studies or other associated studies, just by the nature of the way things are. But at whatisc60.org, as a 501c3, they can post whatever they want. And so you can go there and you can see all the studies, the human studies, the animal studies, the other studies, and they have like a little synopsis next to them and a link. So if you want to look at that study yourself, you can go there and get it. And like, for instance, one of the big key things is C60, only dissolved C60 has any health benefit, which is what we do. We dissolve it in an oil, right? And but particles of C60 have no health benefit, can actually be inflammatory. And so that's something. So if you go out there and you say, oh, C60 is inflammatory, well, it is if it's particles. It's the same way with silica. Dissolved silica is really important for health, for teeth, for hair, for a variety of uses. But if I were to grind up glass, is pretty much almost all silica. If I was to grind up a bunch of glass into nanoparticles and give it to you, the results would be kind of bad because it's not dissolved. And it's the same way with C60. Particles of C60 have no health benefits. And you can read about that. What is C60.org?
I just want to make sure that the audience that isn't scientifically inclined and they're new to supplementation, what Ken is saying is that a powdered form that's not dissolved in a lipid like avocado oil or vegetable oil or the coconut oil,
yeah,
then that powder could harm you. Yeah. And sometimes these studies will be designed in such a way where they're trying to convince the public that C60 is bad, but they're not telling you the full story. And is they're not administering it in a lipid form. They're administering it in a powdered form.
Or they're doing other things. Like, for instance, C60 it's an antioxidant, and if you leave it in sunlight, it can photo-oxidize the oil that it's in. Right? It's the same way. And that's why, like, if you look at pretty much every C60, you notice the bottle is brown, really dark brown. Well, it's dark brown for the same reason beer bottles are dark brown.
Or wine, right?
Yeah, exactly, because light will oxidize the oil, especially if C60 is in it, and then it goes rancid, and or it can do that to your beer or your wine. And so that's why it's put in dark bottles. And they did a study, for instance, where it's an industry hit piece. You actually look at who paid for it, Big Pharma, and they basically they left out C6 to put C60 in a clear glass bottle and gave it the equivalent of like 3 weeks of sunlight, and C60 is and it turned the oil rancid. In fact, the C60 will combine with those rancid products and sink to the bottom of the container if you leave it like in that kind of sunlight or that kind of light level. And then, so there's really no
in a clear
bottle. That's right. It's a clear bottle with high levels of blue and UV light, right? That's going to cause the same way if you sat in the sun for 2 weeks straight, you would probably have pretty severe sunburn. And then they gave it to these mice that were very sensitive to rancidity in oils, and the mice got sick, and some of them developed cancers, which was to be expected, so that they knew that would do that. And the other part of the study, they said, like, they had the study I talked about how C60 increased the lifespan of mice by 11%. And that's because they gave C60 to the mice every day. In this other study, they gave the mice C60 once every 2 weeks, and it didn't increase their lifespan. And then they said, well, C60 doesn't increase the lifespan of mice. No, that's scientific fraud. If you're going to say this experiment was wrong, you have to do exactly the same as the other experiment. You can't give it to them. Oh, and by the way, those mice were a special type of mice. They're hybrid mice where they take 2 types of mice, they breed them together, and their chromosomes dissolve at about 30 in mice years. So C60 or anything else would have not helped those mice at all when your chromosomes dissolve, because they're hybrid mice who are known for chromosome dissolving. They use them in scientific studies. So, I mean, you can also go to whatisc60.org and you can read about that whole study, and you can see exactly the fraud that was going on there. And so, so there are industry hit pieces. There are the stuff about particles of C60, and people just need to know. I mean, you can go to whatisc60.org. You can look at the stuff, but the human studies are pretty good. I mean, or human cell lines. A lot of studies you can't do with humans because of ethical concerns. So they'll do human cell lines in vitro or in the test tube, basically. And so, like, they did a study of neuroprotective ability of C60. They basically put human nerve cells in the test tube, and then they gave one set of the test tubes gets the C60, the control group doesn't get any. Then they exposed them to a variety of neurotoxins, and the nerve cells that had C60 resisted damage from those nerve toxins, whereas the control group, of course, got damage. And so they've seen that, and they did the same with skin cells and a variety of other human cells.
Yeah, it's important to mention to the audience, the ones that don't know, that our neurons, because of these neurotransmitters being, shot out, it needs a lot of ATP. Neurons have a lot of mitochondria to get this high level of ATP. So when you start to have these dendritic recessions where the neurons aren't really connected very well as we age, your neurotransmitters start to shoot slower. And that part of the reason, it's not the only reason, but part of the reason is that the mitochondrial health in the neuron is diminished when we get older. Well, this is more reason to start thinking about lifestyle change and supplementation to improve the mitochondrial health. Because what will happen is by improving that mitochondrial health, by taking B complex, by doing the C60 protocol, then what will happen is that your health of the mitochondria will start to improve, allowing for the neurotransmitters to shoot off. Now, if you create an environment that allows for growth factors between these dendrites, then what will happen is they'll start to reconnect because the neurotransmitters are firing on, right?
Yes.
And then, and then what will happen is that you'll have, more clarity, your cognition, memory will improve. So, there is this is where that kind of like that anti-aging kind of part of it is, but it's not just taking the supplement. It's also like you have to create a condition where there is growth factors. And part of that is a little bit of exercise, challenging the brain, reading, talking to people that don't talk at all and they just stay at home and just stare at the TV. Literally, the brain is atrophying.
Yeah,
right,
it's
atrophying.
so
So there's, and this is part of the reason why women that have better social networks usually live longer after their spouse dies, because men have a tendency to have less social networks as we grow older, while women maintain their social networks. So so talking actually slows down these dendritic recessions that I'm talking about. So, this is why it's like so important to pay attention to bringing down that oxidative load, because if you don't, over time it builds up and it causes more and more damage. And it's not linear, it's nonlinear. Just like you don't really realize that heart disease is happening when you're 16 years old, but you will realize it when you're 40, right? It's a nonlinear event that starts to happen, right?
yeah,
And
but at 40, it's kind of hard. I mean, that's the key thing. If you get it early, you get it young. I mean, the earlier you start this stuff, the better your long-term results will be. Because if you start fighting heart disease at 20, you're not going to have it at 40.
Exactly. And these like studies dealing with mice, right? Let's just say that they didn't, have chromosomal instability mice, as you were talking about. Let's just say they had garden variety wild type mice or whatever. All right. All right. Mice in best situation, they last for 24 months. They usually die before that. All right. Independent as a control, they don't do, you don't do anything to them. They naturally die at around 24 months. All right. They don't live for very long. All right. If you're giving something, an antioxidant, to something that doesn't live for very long, only every 2 weeks, in human years, it's like taking C60 maybe once every 6 months, or once a quarter or whatever.
Yeah.
So the people need to realize that that in that animal model, they would have had to give in multiple doses a day for that mouse years to be equivalent to human years. So that even so people need to recognize that the design of the experiment sometimes dictates the results, especially if they're trying to do a hit piece. And so
yeah.
you have to be discerning, and like go, well, wait a minute here. Who's sponsoring it? Is Big Pharma saying that something, that their big pharmaceutical product that's sold for $1 billion for cancer is a better solution than trying to prevent, to prevent a disease from, emerging. So I
Well,
just
yeah, that's
needs to be more discerning.
yeah, that is a good point. And another thing, yeah, I'd always thought, like nerve cells, for instance, are literally 50% by volume mitochondria. And I'd also, and that's where C60, because C60 passes the gut barrier, passes the blood-brain barrier, taken into the cells by endocytosis, taken into mitochondrial endocytosis, where they know how to use the mitochondria, know how to use it. And but the other thing I actually discovered, I learned is that the cells of the endocrine system also have high levels of mitochondria, even higher than nerve cells. I always thought nerve cells were number one, but evidently the cells, the endocrine system, are actually number one.
I thought it was in the neurons. I didn't
Yeah,
know
so
that.
did I. I did not, but this one study, they said, well, there's more. I go, what? I could hardly believe that. But those endocrine cells, those glands work pretty hard producing all the different things. So that's another cell type that C60 helps. So when you take C60, it restarts the mitochondria in your endocrine system. And in your endocrine system, the mitochondria just don't do ATP. They have other jobs. And especially in the endocrine system, they make pregnenolone, which is the precursor molecule for all the hormones. And so if your pregnenolone levels go up, then you're going to make more of whatever hormone. So it doesn't just happen, so you're going to get more melatonin in your pineal gland. You're going to get more H in your pituitary hypothalamus. You're going to get more human growth hormone. And then the dozens of other master molecule or master things produced there.
You're bringing a great point, and that is that as we age, our endocrine system starts to be not as functional as it should be. And also because of modern lifestyle, endocrine disruption. People don't realize that our environment is disrupting our endocrine system. And because that is happening, our health is starting to decline because that all these different axes between the pituitary and the hypothalamus and the pituitary, secreting certain types of hormones to, let's say, the thyroid or the adrenal glands, or even some of our sex organs, that these things, if they're out of homeostasis, your health will start to decline. So if you can try to prevent that, if you can slow that endocrine disruption down by a myriad of things, supplementation, proper diet, right, then you are getting back to homeostasis because your endocrine system is
Yeah.
more robust.
And this
I
is
think people don't pay attention to their endocrine system. It's about boosting up the immune system, improving the endocrine system, bringing down those free radicals.
and staying away from that plastic, because the plastic makes those BPA and other products leach out of the plastic into your food, into your water, and those are they're estrogen mimics, and they don't just they're not just mimics. They can also jack up the receptors, and so that's one of the problems that people have now is all of these hormone bending chemicals in the water and the food that they eat.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, they were doing. I don't know if you watch it, but the ocean race around the world for the sail ocean race.
I've
I-
seen it. I haven't watched the latest ones.
Well, they did. I, I think the circuit ended last summer. I think it was last summer. I think, and I think it's every 2 years, or
Yeah,
it's not.
yeah, because it
So
takes a year to get around you.
so they were doing an experiment. They were looking. So as they're traveling around the world, they're taking water samples from different oceans,
Oh,
right? And they send them back to the labs once they get back to port, and they're doing um, microplastic analysis, right? And it's just over time, our oceans are just being filled with microplastics. Because we have actually a continent of plastic in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that people don't know about because of the current. It just we have a big garbage can in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And these plastics start to degrade, and these small these small bits and pieces start to float around the whole world, and they can actually measure this.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
it's a
crazy.
real problem. We're poisoning our own well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so I think we've covered, some of the concerns that maybe people
Well,
had.
there's
C60.
one more I think to talk about because we were talking about hormones, and this
Yeah.
is the counterindication. If you're on a blood thinner, you should consult with your doctor before taking C60 because one of the things that C60 does, as we mentioned, it restarts the hormones and the endocrine system, and one of the endocrine systems is the mineral corticoids, which regulates blood pressure or blood thickness, sorry, blood thickness. And so if you're on a blood thinner and you take C60, the underlying cause of why your blood is, quote, thick can go away. And if you're on a blood thinner, now your blood is too thin. So you need to consult with your doctor before taking C60 just to get more testing primarily. And to a certain extent, that's with hormone things, but it's not as critical there. For instance, the typical case, we had a 7-year-old. He went to his doctor. He wasn't feeling, kind of feeling not energetic enough. And doctor tested him out. His testosterone was 350, right? Which is kind of low. So the doctor gives him some creams and it pushes his level up to 700. And then he starts taking C60. He goes into his doctor a few months later and his testosterone level is 1200. So the doctor backs him off on the creams because
Mhm,
the testosterone comes from the androgens, which are produced in your adrenal glands, because your adrenal glands produce three main things: glucocorticoids, which regulate your blood sugar; mineral corticoids, which regulate your blood thickness or blood function in that sense, the mineral balance there, buffering; and then the androgens, which are converted by whatever sex organs you have into progesterone, estrogen, or testosterone. And so when you take C60, all of those levels are going to go up. And that's another side effect of C60 is increase in libido. So watch out for that if you start taking C60.
mhm. Well, what is interesting is I knew someone that had to take insulin because they had Hashimoto's, and they also through Hashimoto's you can also have the it attacking the
Mhm.
pancreas, right? So they weren't producing enough insulin, so they had to take insulin. Now, what was interesting is that by taking C60, because they're always checking their, I mean, when you're a diabetic, you're always checking your blood, and they noticed that by taking C60 that they didn't need to take as much insulin. Because if you take too much insulin, then you
Yeah.
go hypoglycemic, right? So they could back off. So people need to kind of this is like the beauty of this. If you monitor your health with your doctor, right? You can in many times, not always, but many times actually reduce the amount that you need from allopathic medicine because it's your body is now starting to go back to what it used to do. May not go back all the way. So if you need insulin, let's say for example, and you're taking a supplement that you don't need to take as much units of insulin, right? Well, that's a good thing because your endocrine system is kind of coming back online, right? So, just keep that in mind. I think that's a great point. Is that there has to be, there is this kind of dual thing with allopathic, especially if you're elderly and you're on a bunch of medication. Seeing your doctor, paying attention to what type of medication you're on, but that if you are now just starting to get into supplementation, then you monitor it very closely, and in many cases you can dial back some of these things that you're taking allopathically. Um, and and you got to remember a lot of times these allopathic pharmaceuticals, they have side effects. So if you're taking less, that means you're reducing the chances of the side effects.
Yeah.
So I've always believed in this kind of complementary medicine. There's the purists, only seeing MD, types, or yeah, and then there's the other purists on the other side of the spectrum, only see naturopathic. Yeah, I don't fall in that. I think that there's a complementary of both, right? And there's benefits to both, and if you can find that magic blend, then I think you got the right solution. These absolutists on either side of the spectrum, I think, um, you know, it may not be the best for the patient, I think, but I think you're bringing a great point, because this whole endocrine system, as we get older and as it's getting disrupted, people maybe for 2 decades, they're used to this disrupted endocrine system, problems with, with their libido, for example, or problems with energy, or maybe they have too high a cortisol levels or whatever it is, right? And then all of a sudden they start to do supplementation, whatever it is, and then their body is starting to get back to the way it used to be when they were younger, and then they have to readjust because, well, in a way, by at least at the endocrine level, you're moving back in time. You're
It is
getting
absolutely.
healthier and getting healthier, and you just dial back that medication that you're on.
Yes,
But
some women
it
in
has to
the
be monitored by a doctor.
some women in the almost the perimenopause phase may go backwards with C60 to an earlier time. That is
Yeah.
another thing. And
Have you heard anything about postmenopausal?
sometimes they've gone back to perimenopausal. So if they're on the edge there, and a large number of babies have also fertility increases hugely with C60. So that's
Well, maybe more a little bit
recommend
issue there.
exactly. There's a couple of factors for that
And it
one.
may not be anything about the woman. I mean,
Yeah.
it's about the guy.
But another thing we need to talk about is also C60 increases stem cell levels. And this is actually because, C60, they only started researching this in the 2000s. And even that was slow, right? And so this came from one of the research they did with rabbits. They gave rabbits arthritis, because that's what they do in science experiments. And then they injected C60 into the joints to obviously fight the inflammation caused by arthritis. And lo and behold, that actually happened, which was expected, right? Obviously, C60 is an antioxidant. It fights inflammation. So if you put it into arthritis in rabbits, well, then it would be surprising. But when they actually they sacrificed the rabbits and looked at the joints, they found that the cartilage had regrown, which was an unexpected side effect. And then there's been some more research and what they find out is C60, all throughout our bodies, we have these cells. They're called senescent cells. You could think them of as zombie cells. And these cells have damage. Usually it's DNA damage, but there's other damages. And usually there's mechanisms in the cell itself or in the body to get rid of these cells. But a lot of them just hang on. They don't want to die. And they become, quote, senescent cells. And what's happened is our normal cells, when we're breathing, we breathe oxygen because we use the Krebs cycle, right? We're oxygen burners. Well, senescent cells go back into the fermentation mode, kind of like the primitive mode that existed before, we became oxygen breathing. And cancer cells are like that too. They go in this fermentation mode. And so they're just basically burning sugars into alcohols. Now, one of the problems is they're producing alcohols and other pro-inflammatory toxins, which are poisoning the cells around them. And one of the ways they do that is they stop providing antioxidants to the mitochondria. So the mitochondria cannot go into the Krebs cycle, primarily SOD catalase. That goes away. And so the mitochondria, which are actually ancient symbiotic bacteria, they have to go in the fermentation mode too. So the whole cell's in the fermentation mode. When you take C60 is uptaken by senescent cells, and where it goes into the mitochondria and restarts the Krebs cycle. That means those mitochondria start burning oxygen again, making ATP. And they have their own DNA and they work symbiotically with the cell. And so when that happens, they will send messages to the nuclear DNA of the senescent cell, and they will not get the right message back. And then the mitochondria blow themselves up basically and cause apoptosis, or programmed cell death, where the cell breaks down into apoptotic bodies, which, by the way, is non-inflammatory. The body has set this up so it's not inflammatory. It just kind of break down. And so when people take a lot of C60, it causes a large decrease in senescent cells. And correspondingly, it causes a great increase in stem cells, because once your tissue or organ no longer has as many cells as needed, the body knows that. And so it sends messages, hey, we need more stem cells. And stem cells are like baby cells. They can go into whatever tissue or organ there is and differentiate into like a kidney cell or in some cases, a thyroid cell. We've had a lot of people like on Hashimoto's, zero function of the thyroid for like 20 years, right? They start taking C60, and after, let's say, 6 months to a year, they're off like a third of their thyroid medicine.
Mhm. That's
And
what
then
I'm
it gets
saying.
to like a half, and then it gets to three quarters.
And the thing that people need to realize that with these types of diseases like Hashimoto's, it's an attack of it's an attack of the tissue by the immune system. Well,
Yeah,
and many of these patients will also have this attack on the pancreas, and
yeah.
therefore they have to be on insulin or lipases or other enzymes that are secreted, by the
Yeah.
pancreas.
Yeah, because
So
C60 is known to just to reduce autoimmune situations. So it's going to reduce the inflammation, the autoimmune thing, but over time it also rebuilds this because there's all kinds of senescent cells in the thyroid, or perhaps even the pancreas or the kidneys. And then C60 goes in there, it wipes out those senescent cells. They're replaced by stem cells. And the stem cells have full functionality because they're baby cells. Then they become a new thyroid cell, right? Then they can start working the way that it's supposed to be. And so that's what we think is what's going on is that because this happens over a long period of time. This is like 6 months to a year. And by the way, like when my macular degeneration went away and Gary's went away, it was 7 months before I went to see the eye doctor. Now, when it actually went away, I don't know. But with Gary, because he had severe wet macular degeneration, and he was going like in every month to, or every 2 months to, to get his stuff, we know for sure what was happening. And that took over a year. So this is like a long-term effect there. So there's these long-term effects you get from C60 where literally organs are rebuilt. And like we had a lady, she had 30% loss of her kidneys, and her nephrologist told her, "Oh, it's just going to get worse until you need to have a kidney transplant." Well, she takes C60, she goes in 3 or 4 months later to see her nephrologist, and she has 100% kidney function. The nephrologist can't understand it. It's supposedly
so
incapable.
you think that what's happening is it's like the glomerulus and some of the tubes, you
Yeah, I think
know,
they're literally being
that are actually regenerating
yes, that's
from.
it's going to be because it regenerated. The optic nerve is what is in, and optic nerves, of course, are full of mitochondria because the optic nerve is part of the brain, and so literally it rebuilt the optic nerve, but it took a while, and it's probably the nephrons are also full of mitochondria because they do a lot of work. I mean, any cell type, like muscle cells, heart cells, they got a lot of mitochondria. So any cell type with a lot of mitochondria will will have benefits. Like we did a study once on, and it was on because a lot of people said that their cataracts were going away. They had light cataracts and it was going down, and so we actually sponsored and did a scientific. We got a research PhD. It was approved by the medical board of Colorado, and everything was through, and it was a full science study. And all the participants, we found that all of the participants, it was done by an optometrist, was doing all of the participants improved their vision, but it wasn't because the cataracts went down. There wasn't much change in the cataracts, maybe a little bit, but really not much, because the cells of your lens have very few mitochondria, and they turn over very slowly. So the chances of that really having an effect, but the optic nerve is like half mitochondria because they're nerve cells. And so that's how we kind of discovered, that's our part of discovering, the whole thing with the mitochondria is literally
um,
because it's any cell type with a lot of mitochondria. So you're talking nerve cells, cells of the endocrine system, other tissue types like the kidneys and liver,
and the
and
liver, right?
yeah, other cell types, that don't have a lot of mitochondria, not as much benefit there. So, and that's also part of the whole, we're not the only ones that did, but we contributed to the whole understanding how C60 increases mitochondria function because, any cell type with a lot of mitochondria is where you're going to get the most C60 benefit.
Yeah. See, what I've noticed is like there seems to be a synergistic effect with resveratrol and NMN,
So it should, because all of
and
those,
and and they're all attacking it from a slightly different vector, but it's
Mhm.
like a supercharge to improve that mitochondria.
I like to say it in an analogy that a lot of people can understand. It's like it's a car. Imagine your body's the car, right? Or your cell is the car. Well, C60 is like the radiator fluid. So, if you got your radiator topped off, it keeps, the inflammation down, it keeps the heat down. But if you're running a car, you still need the engine oil, to keep all the parts moving. You need the fuel, good fuel, high premium fuel to make that thing run. Hell, you'd even need, air in the tire and windshield washer fluid. to make sure everything's working. And so, C60 it's one thing, but it's very important. You need all these other things. So you still got to have the good diet. You still got to get the sleep. You still got to get the exercise. You got to do, I mean, as you get older and you want good health, it takes a lot of effort. It will not happen. There is no magic pill out there. And if you think you're going to find a magic pill, it's not going to happen. You have to do multiple things. And the older you get, the more you have to do. Another thing that I personally have found, I'm not giving medical advice, is intermittent fasting. That has been one of the most beneficial things I've found for my health, first in losing weight and just improving general health. And I'm on the 18-hour plan where I basically fast for 18 hours and eat a couple of meals within that 6-hour window. And I found that's just done incredible improvements in my health.
So are you cutting out carbs, or are you doing?
Yeah, I cut out a lot of carbs, not all carbs. I've cut out the trash carbs, like out of bread and other things like that. Trash carbs have got alcohol. You have to give that alcohol up. And certain levels of meat, I probably eat more fish rather than red meat. These are other things. And so I just found that that's one of the benefits. Because I would diet and I would only go down to a certain level, right? And I was just stuck there, which was way higher than I should be. And then when I intermittent fast, it punched right through. And now I'm down in the areas that what I was in high school, the weight. And sometimes Christmas comes by or other holiday periods, you go on vacation, it goes up, and then you have to push back
It's the
down.
pumpkin pie.
Goes up. Yes, exactly.
Pumpkin pie.
That's just going to happen. But you can at least you can get down to where you should be. And also just do it one step at a time. If you're going to this, don't do like the radical diet change and all this other stuff. Oh, I'm going to run 3 miles. No, just walk around the block and then walk around a couple of blocks, then walk around 3 blocks. Don't try and, change your diet here, cut this thing out, cut that thing out, shorten it. Don't go for an 18-hour without eating. Just go to, let's say, 12 hours. And then, just
So with the intermittent fasting, how many calories per day do you think you're consuming?
Well, I don't really know. I don't really count. I've actually done this because I'll eat, the same meals. And I found that because I monitor my weight and my blood pressure and a bunch of other things, I found that I will eat the exact same meal, but in, let's say, a 10-hour window, and I will gain weight. And then I will eat that exact same meal in the 6-hour window, and I will not gain weight. The exact same meal, the exact same level of calories. So there's something about not just the amount that you eat, but the time in which you eat it. And I've done that myself because, that's scientists, experiment on ourselves. That's kind of the way things go. And so I saw it anecdotally, and then I decided, I'm going to experiment and do this correctly. And yeah, it's bizarre, but so you could eat the exact same calories and in that 6-hour window and lose weight, whereas you eat them in a 10-hour window and you gain weight. There it is.
Well, dissecting a little bit, if you had a continuous glucose level in the blood, right? So, the moment that your glucose starts to get into your cell, let's just say this theoretically, you put another glucose molecule into the bloodstream, right? And you just had continuous blood glucose level, which that's not what happens, but let's just say you did that. Then what most likely would happen is that one would gain weight. So intermittent fasting to me seems as though it's this bringing down the glucose level enough to think that the body is now needing to burn the triglycerides that are in the adipose tissue.
Yes.
And slowly what happens is that it starts to shrink those fat cells little bit by titrating the triglycerides, the fatty acids into the bloodstream, and then eventually they're turning it into energy sources in the liver, right?
Yeah, that's one thing. Another thing I noticed is my digestion hugely improved when I went to this. And I'm thinking it because let's look at your average American, right? They get up at 6, 7 in the morning, they eat a breakfast, right? Maybe crappy cereal, right? Then they go to lunch, they eat lunch, they go home, maybe have the dinner maybe late, and then they're sitting around watching TV, eating things. Well, you've got your digestive system. That digestive system is working 18 hours a day, maybe 20 hours a day. It doesn't get a break. If you went out and worked 20 hours a day, you'd be exhausted. Well, you're making your digestive system work that, and maybe it's exhausted. And so when I'm only eating that 6 hour window, so maybe my digestive system's only working 8 hours a day. And I think that my ability to digest things went way up. I mean, because I noticed that was like huge. And I was already taking C60 and all this stuff. So it wasn't that. And I think what happens is if you give your pancreas a break, you give your duodenum a break, you give the small intestines a break so they can sit there and sleep or rest and recover and just don't work them, don't work them 20 hours a day, work them 8 hours a day. And just like if you will work 8 hours a day, you're going to be much more productive and healthy rather than 20 hours a day. I think it's the same with the digestive system.
Right. And if you just do the mind experiment, and I had this conversation with my brother that's trying to lose weight. We were a species that had to go and hunt, right? We didn't have
Mhm.
Kroger's around the corner or,
Yeah.
some sort of mega, grocery store to go to, right? So there were times where there was this where you didn't have really a fuel source and you're just using what you stored, right? So the body wasn't designed to have high levels of glucose constantly, nor was the intestine designed to constantly be breaking down
Mhm.
material, right? And this makes a lot of sense that, when if you eat more, most likely more polyps will start to arise because there's more stress on that lining in the gut where in the crypt for the gut, some sort of precancerous cell starts to emerge and then all of a sudden a polyp starts and then it can get really dangerous if it's not removed. It's just that there is some logic to the idea of what if we go back to the way we were 7, 8, 10,000 years ago, when we were hunting mastodons or whatever. Most likely we'd be a lot healthier. Plus that society walked a lot. It wasn't like they got out of their tent and shot a bow and arrow at a buffalo, right? They
No,
had to
no,
walk, like far to go
well,
find the buffalo.
that's like the Maasai, that tribe in Africa that herds cattle.
Yeah.
They have virtually no heart disease. They're the really tall guys. You've probably seen them on TV. Really tall guys. They do the jumping thing, and they
Yeah.
herd the cows. They drink cow blood, cow milk, which is not the best diet, and yet they have no heart disease because they get up in the morning and they get out of their hut and they walk with the cows all day long because they're herding them, right? That's their livelihood. So they herd them out to the fields, right? And they're herding them around to make sure they keep them predators away, herding them back at night. So they just walk all day long, and they really don't have any heart disease, even though they're eating milk fat, right? Huge amounts of milk fat, and also they drink the blood, and occasionally they'll get a wild animal, but they're mostly living off what would be quote not that healthy, but they don't get heart disease because of that just constant exercise.
And I'm willing to bet that by you doing the intermittent fasting, that problematic joints have gone away.
Oh yeah, there's
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
I
Because
also
there's
walk like an hour.
inflammation. You're just constantly feeding the body at
Mhm.
these high glucose levels. It's pro-inflammatory, and this is part of the reason why when people get older, their joints don't work right, and they're sluggish. They don't, they just want to sleep, or they just turn on the TV and eat another TV dinner or whatever. You know, if you move the body more like it used to be thousands of years ago, instead of in the realm of the modern day man, right, woman,
Yeah.
the body there's the capacity of healing even in the 50s and 60s years of age. It's pretty phenomenal the way the
Yeah.
body can regenerate.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and that's just, I mean, people, I think the number one thing the worst thing I think is television.
Yeah.
Because television, first off, when people watch the flickering rate, it literally puts their mind in like a alpha state, goes out of beta to alpha or theta, and they're just like their brain stops. Your brain doesn't. You're not exercising your brain anymore. You're not talking. You're literally your brain is like zombified, and your body is zombified because you're just sitting there. And I think the advent of television for the destruction of human health is one of the biggest things of all. If people, if they just get through, I haven't had television for 30 years, right? I just don't own any televisions. I have computer screens, but I read my news. I don't watch it.
Do you read it through electronic device, or do you read it like in the paper form?
Oh, I don't read the papers anymore. They're so bad. Well, occasionally I have magazines delivered that are actually worthwhile and worthy of being read, but the local rags here are just so bad that so I go to various blog sites that news aggregators and just choose
Yeah.
what I'm going to read. So I choose what I read, and when you're reading, of course, that's a whole nother thing. Our brains. I think there's the difference between people that do not read or people who cannot read, who can read and do not read. There's no difference between a literate person and a person who can read and doesn't read. I think there's a total intellectual change in the brain of people that read. It's and it's
I think that's true. And the
and,
sad thing was when my father ended up getting dementia, Ken, he was such an avid reader.
mhm.
And you could see that we really thought he was going to be a centurion. I mean, he was healthy, he walked all the time, he didn't run, he didn't lift weights or anything, he just walked. He
Mhm.
ate his green beans, and he read all the time, and he just looked like he didn't, but he had ischemic dementia. He had some blood flow. For the ones that don't know what ischemic dementia is that the blood flow was reduced,
Yeah,
and
our arteries, heart.
hippocampus started to shrink, and
Oh,
and it went fast, and it was fast.
yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah, that's well, there's those. I mean, we all have our expiration dates, but the key is and that's the thing. If we get this stuff early, if you start in your 20s or 30s, if you're listening out there and you're young, the sooner you start a good, healthy lifestyle, and all the other things we've talked about, the longer you're going to be around and the healthier and better you're going to feel during those old, those ages when you can get up there. Because there's people my age that I like. It's really kind of depressing if you ever go back to a high school reunion or to a certain extent a college reunion. I mean, you'll just see, I'm pretty fit and healthy and reasonably going. I mean, I'm still going, right? It's just not but some people, I think it's kind of scary. It looks like, who are these people?
Now, my brother, the surviving brother he falls in that category where he looks a lot older than he is.
Mhm.
And maybe it's because family stress, and he's
Oh God, yes, we
you
all
know,
will.
and
Every
that
family
it's the diet, and it's and he's Orthodox Jew, and so it's that lifestyle and the types of foods that they eat on a regular basis for
yeah, it's a
shop
good, yeah,
for the holidays, very high calorie diets, and you know
yes. Too
I
way too
would
much
say that
bread.
his comfort food is bread.
Yeah, I know. Bread is not. Yeah, no, we are not designed to eat bread.
No,
That's just something that's like B grade food. And
I
originally,
live, I
the
only have 2 pieces of bread a week.
Yeah. They actually discovered that, the reason people started brewing or growing grain was for brewing beer.
Really?
Yeah, that's what they found. Yeah, the pots, the earliest pots, and they discovered, they look at them and no, this is alcoholic residue from alcoholic beverages. So they would actually harvest those grains, grind them up, and actually brew alcoholic beverages. It was only later that bread was developed, probably from the used over grains after the process was still had some nutrition. But yeah, I mean, I can't say drinking alcohol is good, but that's yeah, I mean, yeah, we just didn't, yeah, cutting the that carbs out of your body, the bread carbs, the grains of all types, I think, and to a
When
certain extent.
when you and I were kids, I'm sure that you know that you saw a library, or you were at the bookstore, the
Yes.
local,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We had those things, and,
right?
and there
Now,
wasn't.
and nowadays, the libraries, at least in New York, they're not that busy at all.
Oh
You
no.
know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
sad. It's so sad that there's like no one is reading books anymore.
We have libraries here, and it's like all the people are sitting at computer screens. And the racks are just left for themselves, and all these people, they go in there because it's a cheap computer or something, and they can't afford it or something. That's where you don't see the reading. No. And yeah, my parents would not let us watch. We would only be able to watch certain television shows. right? It was like a treat maybe in the day, you know, after dinner, you could watch like a couple hours of television shows that were approved because they were, you know, the sort of things that our parents would, you know, there was moralism back there.
You know, one of the approved shows I was able to watch when I was a kid was Dukes of Hazzard. You remember BJ McKay and the Bear?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I remember seeing as a kid. You
Mhm.
know, or you know, reruns of the original Star Trek.
Yep, those,
You know,
even
those
some
are
of the
those.
other, I can't, yeah, we all saw the National Geographic specials, those were allowed to be seen.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you. You know, I I always liked watching Peter Jennings when he was on ABC. You know, when I was a kid, I just
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
as he was an anchor when he just started, and you know, so it was always kind of, and this is before cable came to the house, before they laid the line.
Oh, okay, yeah,
So,
we had exactly three stations where I lived, because we were out in this, you know, we had three stations, that was it. That said it, and there wasn't a lot, you know.
we had four, but
Oh,
because
man.
we were in Detroit, we would be able to get a broadcast from Windsor, Canada. All right.
Oh,
So we had 2, 4, 7, and Channel 13, which was the broadcast that was coming from Canada. So, and watching the Peanuts, you know,
oh,
Snoopy,
yep,
the one for the
yep, I
Peanuts.
remember those.
I remember being able to see on Channel 13 the French version of it because it was coming from
Oh,
Quebec.
oh, yeah, that would make sense, yes.
You know, so well, I think you know, I think we've explained the benefits of C60, Ken, to the audience, and how they can kind of, you know, mix it with some other things, and you know, on my story.
C60 and ester ketones for people with dementia and other mental problems. Anecdotally, it's just amazing.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, ester ketones and C60, just those are like chocolate and peanut butter when dealing with mental decline.
Right, right, right. See, what I've been doing on the anti aging boxes, you know, I couple with the, you know, all
Mhm.
these different supplements, and C60 is one of the core of this protocol. I also have partnered up with Boomer Products.
Oh
So
yeah,
a lot of
oh
their
yeah, they got
supplements,
good stuff.
I mix your supplement with their supplements. And I also partnered up with two different laboratories that are in Utah with
Yeah.
structural nanosilver. But this
Mhm.
whole idea of neutralize pathogens, bring down inflammation, and you know, bring down free radicals as a kind of this protocol, right? And one of an added supplement that I put in there is the clarity factor from Boomer.
Yes,
And
yeah, I
so
use more
there's
Cooper products. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I just, and I, you know, and people are happy with, you know, with this curating of these anti-aging boxes. So
That's
you
what, yeah,
know,
because you gotta work the whole thing, because it's just, you know, it's not just one thing. It's like a multiple of things. And yeah, the Boomer products have some really nice uh like the one, what is it, they, I can't remember the name right now, but the one where they, for us geezers, where they have the whole vitamin mix in the
oh,
scoop.
that's the bar that's the heirloom barley.
No, not the
Vitamin.
heirloom barley, it's the other one. It's like anyway, I'll have to think about it what it is.
Yeah, I don't remember. Oh,
I haven't,
gladiator, gladiator. I think they call it
yeah,
gladiator.
that's what it is. Yeah, the glad. Yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't been using the barley because I've been trying to avoid the though it does have all kinds of benefits. The
right,
gladiator
right.
barley, well, it's gladiator barley that they it really help the gladiators. So, but I've been trying to keep low on that. So, but of course, another problem with all of our grains is they spray glyphosate on the grains before they harvest them, because they want to harvest at the uniform moisture, so they kill them and then harvest them. And that's why, but they ban glyphosate in Europe. So like a lot of people, you go to Europe and people eat all kinds of grains and there's no problems at all. They say, this is wonderful, blah, blah, blah. And then they come back to the United States and take, you know, get some grains and get sick. And it's because the glyphosate levels in our grains are just so high that they allow all kinds of things to happen in the United States, which are banned pretty much everywhere else.
Right. If a farm is certified organic, do they have that problem or
No,
not?
they don't. And there's also a lot of modern wheats have like really high levels of gluten. They've been genetically engineered or just bred to have high levels of gluten. And there's a thing called Sonoran wheat. And it's the same wheat that the Spanish colonialists brought over from Spain, you know, in the 1500s, right? And so you can actually buy that. They grow it down south in Mexico and in Arizona, and you can buy that grain. And it's also organic, so they don't spray stuff on it. And it has a lower gluten profile, and a lot of people like using that.
You know, it was so interesting. I had one of my graduate level seminar classes right before I finished my coursework at Harvard, before I started my research on the TAT protein for HIV. This seminar class that we had, there was 13 grad students in there, and the whole class was based on research papers, and going over the details and critiquing them, and and what a part of the class was dealing with CRISPR. Another part of the class was dealing with genetic engineering and the benefits of it, right? And what was so interesting, out of the 13 grad students, I would say about half, so it was a good, almost half, were for genetic engineering, and the other half was against.
Mhm.
And you had people that were, high powered minds, in the class trying, that you could see the ethical divide, where
Yeah.
they felt justified, through logic. It wasn't like, but they logically could justify their positions either way. I was against frankenfood, but I'm against genetic manipulation of food supply.
I don't think, we can.
But there are people that are for it.
Oh yeah, because yeah, it's just, yeah.
It's not just big. It's not big ag. It's not just big ag.
Oh no,
There are researchers that ethically have a foundation in their mind that doing all this genetic manipulation in the food supply is justifiable to, help with nutritional needs for certain societies, or reduce, you know, destruction of crops because of pests or whatever.
Yeah, but they found, like in CRISPR, they found all kinds of problems because CRISPR, it cuts out other things as well. And there's unintentional benefit.
Exactly.
There's unintentional.
It's not targeted very well. The
Yeah, exactly.
PAM sequence it doesn't target very well. So it's, if you have a PAM sequence, that might be, in a particular, let's say, chromosome, that may be there may be 100 of them. Well, how do you know which of the 100 you're targeting?
Yeah, exactly. And so they,
so you're going to have unintended consequences or collateral damage. It's too blunt of an instrument as it is designed right now. It's too blunt of an instrument to be surgical for the cutting and pasting of a particular.
yeah, I think the same with any mRNA kind of thing. That's not what we want to go to.
Let's not go down that road.
Yeah. So
we're trying to stay on YouTube here.
Yeah, right. So yeah,
okay.
You got to be. I have a whole. I mean, nature. I just don't think we have the knowledge and the science to go messing with that yet. Maybe somewhere in the future, but the unintended consequences of stuff like that, which we've found many times, it's just not worth it.
Exactly. Well, I think I think the audience has been able to get some thoughts from you and from me about how to improve their health through C60, and how to couple it with different types of supplements, and some of the bogus data that's out there to try to discredit certain types of supplements, like C60.
Yeah, that's right. We should point out that this is not unique to C60. There's just a lot of hit pieces going on there.
Well, there's hit pieces on D3. There's hit pieces on
yeah.
There's hit pieces on resveratrol. There's hit pieces on vitamin C and all this stuff. The thing is that the wisdom of a grandmother, is pretty powerful. And every time we were sick as kids, it was take more vitamin C and have chicken soup. All right.
Yep.
And you got better.
I remember that. Yes, it was.
But literally in medical school, they say vitamin C doesn't do anything for a cold. You have a biochemist. I'm dead serious here. You have a biochemist that's saying vitamin C doesn't do anything, that taking extra doesn't help. And I'm like going, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And but he said that eating 1 carrot a day is going to improve your eyesight. 1 carrot a day. All right,
Yeah.
the beta carotene, yeah, I agree. You know, but you need a hell of a lot more than 1 carrot to improve your eyesight.
Exactly. So that's why supplementation.
It's like they're, but you know, it's so. I honestly, I think these biochemists, you know, at times, especially you know when they're coming from the medical field, I think that they
If all you've
really
got
not
is a
paying
hammer,
attention to what has been going on the naturopathic or the natural route. You know, there's a synergy there.
yeah,
It's sad that they don't see it because they have the education to bridge the gap.
but if all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah, oh, for sure. But it's just it was so funny to see this guy. You know, he was so hell bent on saving his eyesight with one carrot.
For a
But
day,
if you have a cold, take an extra vitamin C. It isn't going to help.
no, they get into a box. I think they've spent too much time in academia and not enough time in reality.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much, Ken, for
Great.
coming onto the show and explaining C60 and you know
Maybe
telling
we
me
do
all.
more of these than once every year and a half or whatever it was.
Yeah, we should. And you know, I really enjoy our conversations on current events because they're informative, but unfortunately, those kinds of conversations would only be able to be on Rumble, Bitchute,
Yes.
Brighteon.
Yes, they would not make it through not 5 minutes on YouTube.
Right. So and maybe we'll schedule something for that. Okay. So thank you for coming on to the
Great to be
channel.
on.
And let me stop the recording here.